because I too am talking to you about disputes. And really the message is get it right first time, because if you don't get it right first time, then there are all sorts of consequences that come down the way. But I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not here to lecture you. I'm just here to give you a bit of an insight into what we do. And I'm doing that because I think that further down the line, at some point in the future, you may well find that there will be ombudsman services that cover construction. And I'll explain that a bit as I go along. And just to give you my credentials, I've been about in the property sector for a very, very long time. So before I did this job, I was chief executive of Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council. And when I was there, we had the largest house building programme in the southeast. We also redeveloped the town centre. I then went from Basingstoke and Deane to be the chief planning officer at the planning inspectorate, which means that a couple of those buildings, the Shard in particular, came under my watch and were the result of public inquiries. I then went on to Salisbury Cathedral, and I oversaw the construction of a completely new block of toilets right in the middle of the cathedral, the first new build at Salisbury Cathedral for 700 years. So I've been around the construction industry for a very long time, and why I'm doing this is because with that level of insight, what you're able to do is actually say very, very clearly to people that you have to get things right, you have to raise standards, and you have to know who you're dealing with. So I deal a lot with government, and government continually talks about the broken housing market. So I'm looking at the housing market in particular at the moment. And one of the things you'll find is that government is looking closer and closer at what is happening, specifically in terms of new build. So they're getting really concerned about the balance of power in construction and the impact that has on consumers. And they're looking at what they see as a deconstruct and a lack of understanding by the construction industry about what they do and how they do it, and particularly developers in this case. So they're looking at the fact, how many of you have heard about the mis-selling of leaseholds for new homes? And this is a really big issue, and it's really a big scandal, which I think government will move to do something about. They're looking at the way in which the private rented sector is working and whether or not there's an imbalance of power. They're looking at the way in which currently, in an unregulated sector, people can misappropriate client money. They're looking at, again, can you just make money out of people because they happen to be there? They're looking at the quality of new home, and they're looking at the need for a new homes ombudsman. So all of these things are going on and going on now. It might take a while, but it will come in eventually. And I gave evidence, in the last 6 months, I gave evidence to an all-party parliamentary group on the need for a new homes ombudsman. And by the time we'd got to the end of the session, the MPs were talking about bringing in an ombudsman for every element of construction. If you have a conservatory built, if you have a porch built, why should you not be able to complain about the quality of construction and the way in which you were made to sign contracts without understanding them in the first place? So that's why I'm here. It's to talk to you about consumer culture and making sure that consumer cultures are led by the industries that actually oversee them, because unless culture is driven by the industries that serve consumers, you won't get the right outputs. At the moment, there is redress for private letting and for private sales and for residential leasehold management. But there's additional protection that's needed for landlords who don't use an agent. Sometimes they're accidental landlords, sometimes they're landlords with huge portfolios. For new homes, there is no redress currently for new homes. And there is a real need to look at the whole of the construction of the right to build element and how that's playing out in the market into right to rent. New homes is the big one, and new homes is something that there has now been a real call for an ombudsman, and I think you'll find that at the party conferences that go on, well, they've started already, but the Conservative Party conference will probably talk quite a lot about the introduction of a new homes ombudsman. So this is where an ombudsman actually makes a difference. What we do is to look at how you can get it right in the first place, how you can put it right when it goes wrong, and how you can set it right for the longer term by raising standards in the industry. And those three things are what it's all about. It's not just about disputes. It's about saying you should move beyond a dispute into making sure that people have better guidance, people have more insight, people are more empowered. So at the Property Ombudsman, what we do is to make sure that we have codes of practice for the main areas. And again, this is something that government is very keen on. Codes of practice which are accessible, understandable, and usable. At the moment, our main ones are for residential estate agency and residential lettings, but we intend to extend that into the leasehold and hopefully into new homes going forwards. We have teeth. We have currently around about 11,000 companies, which covers 20,000 just under branches across the country. That's the UK and the Channel Islands. And what we do is we look at the complaints that come to us. We start with inquiries. We do as much as we can to empower consumers. We then do as much as we can for early resolution. But at the end of the day, if we find that people have placed consumers in a position where they have lost money, we put them back in the position they should be in, and we can also make awards for compensation. So our awards, the highest award we can give is 25,000. For the new home sector, we're looking at raising that to 50,000. And of the awards we gave last year, they totaled 1.36 million. We made, I think it was 3 awards of 25,000. And what we've got is a rising number of awards because there are rising numbers of complaints. We work really hard to make sure that we practice what we preach. So we make sure that as an ombudsman, we have a means by which we can talk and exchange. And so we have a consumer forum and we have an industry forum. So anybody can contact us and say, we've got an issue that we think is causing consumer detriment. Can we discuss it? And what we seek to do is to get improvement and understanding in the industry so that we can make things better on a regular basis. We also work really, really closely with government. So at the moment, our government department is the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. And what we are talking to them about is a new homes ombudsman, and we're talking to them about a single portal so that if you're a consumer, you can go to a single point of access and find out who you can complain to. And that's really important because universal access, which is free to a consumer, is what will make everybody have a fair approach to the way in which they're being treated in their industry. So we're working with government who are looking more and more closely at the need to introduce regulatory frameworks so that everybody knows where they are, and that too comes back to what Gerald was saying. That will be also part of an approach for a fit and proper person test and for accreditation for minimum standards in professional qualifications. Government is absolutely clear that this is a sector that needs to prove that it does know what it's doing and that it can actually maintain the confidence of the people it serves. We do what we can to inform and educate. Our first line is to empower consumers, and we deal with 23,000 inquiries a year where we empower consumers and say, okay, tell us what your problem is, let's see if we can find a solution, let's see if we can help you structure your concerns, let's see if we can help you articulate your concerns. Of 23,000 inquiries, only about 3,500 go through for an adjudicated review. And an adjudicated review will then look at the evidence. So look at what actually happened through an evidence base, not what people thought had happened, not what people remembered happening, not what people believed should have happened, but what actually happened. And again, this links back to the previous speaker. The need for professional input to maintain integrity, to make sure that you keep records, that you keep evidence, that your people are trained, and that when disputes arise, you can then actually prove that the right things were done at the right time, in the right way, including making sure that people understand the contracts that they are signing. That too means that you have to make sure that the contracts actually are understandable. Telling somebody on page 56 in small print that if they do certain things they might get charged twice is not a very good idea. So we do what we can to make sure we're talking and engaging right the way across the board, and we engage through Property Press. So I suppose that's my parting shot to you, really. If there are areas in which you think we can help you in your industry by talking about how to have a consumer culture, by talking about how to handle complaints, by talking to you about getting it right first time, by talking to you about raising standards, then we will be delighted to do so. So I think I might be a bit ahead of myself, but I'm very happy to take questions if anybody would like to ask any questions. Because we do what we can. So the lady said, why from 23,000 inquiries do we only then deal with 3,500 complex complaints? Because what we try and do is resolve them much earlier in the process. So we will take inquiries and we will talk to people and find out what it is that they're upset about. And when they ring us, they're not ringing us to say, have a good day. They're ringing us to say, something terrible has gone wrong, I'm absolutely furious, and I want something to happen. And what we do, we spend time to say, okay, tell us what happened, tell us what it was about, tell us when it happened, and we will then engage with them and say, look, what you need to do is to go back to your service provider and say, this is what happened, and we'd like to discuss it with you, but we help them structure it. And if we can, we just take the heat out of it so that they can go back and actually talk about it in a sensible way to get resolution. At the same time, we might go through to the organisation concerned and say, look, we've heard from Mrs. Smith, and we need you to know that if she does make a formal complaint, we're probably going to support her. You need to get back in there and talk to her. And then that's what we call local resolution, and then we'll do early resolution. So if we can get two sides together quicker, then we will. Because if you go right the way down the adjudication route, it means you've got two people in standoff. And when you get two people in standoff, in the end, you get a winner and a loser. So what we try and do is get earlier wins. And I suppose in your industry, you might be more familiar with mediation and arbitration and negotiation. But I think that those three things, alongside what we do, which is alternative dispute resolution, all have their place in this industry at various times. Do I have any other questions? If not, it looks like an early coffee break. How would that be? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.